Yes. I see it, and I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, should we get started then?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to this engaged conversation on faculty recruitment and retention for equity and student success in STEM. And STEM here stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. We are from the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics, this team of 5 presenters. You see our names listed down there. But before my co-presenters and I introduce ourselves more formally, let me first start by acknowledging and paying our respect to the history of the land where our university presently sits. California State University, Long Beach, CSULB, is located on the sacred site of Gumna on the land of Tongva Gabrielino and the Ahakman Juanino nations. So with that, I will start by introducing ourselves, but as we do that, I would ask the attendees to also please write your name, your campus, and your role. That is whether you're a student, faculty, advising staff, or administrator in the chat box. We could also, if it's a small enough audience, please feel free to turn on your microphone and introduce yourself after the presenters are done doing so. So hello, I am Deepali Bhandari. I'm Associate Professor of Biochemistry at California State University, Long Beach in the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics. And I also serve as the faculty equity advocate for our college. Margie, could you please introduce yourself?
I am Margie Merryfield. I am a professor in chemistry and biochemistry, also an equity advocate from the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics.
Thank you. Andrea?
Hi, I was on mute, but now I'm not. I'm Andrea Balbas, Assistant Professor in the Geological Sciences Department.
Kurt?
Hi, I'm Curtis Bennett. I'm the Richard D. Green Dean of the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics.
Kelly?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Kelly Young. I'm a professor in biological sciences, and I'm serving this year as the Director of Faculty Retention in our College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics.
And let me see the chat. So we have Larissa, Christina, who are our producers of the show. And then we have Lisa Ott, and she is a chemistry faculty at Chico State. Is there anyone who hasn't introduced themselves? Okay. Right, here we go.
Yeah, so we thought we would kick things off with just a really quick exercise. One of the questions that some of the reviewers of presentations actually had for us is, well, what does this have to do with student success? And so we thought we would pose that question to the people who are here in the room. And what I'd like you to do, the reason you cannot see the prompt, is that what we want you to do is type your response to the prompt and then wait to actually hit send until I say send. So now if you could bring up the prompt is, how does faculty hiring and retention connect to student success? So type your response, and then when I hit send, we'll see what everybody's response is. And this is one of these, oh my goodness, when we're waiting, it seems a long time. But at any rate, hit send if you have not. So I see students love seeing the same faculty. It makes them feel secure, selecting people with shared goals of enhancing student success. Any other thoughts that might be coming in, being along the lines? faculty directly impacting the student experience. Our mentorship matters, so students feel included, supported, and that their success matters. Okay, so we think there are lots of reasons why the faculty that we hire connect very directly. Dee's going to share a few insights on that.
Right. Thank you, Margie. So let's just look at the average hours a first semester student will spend. And I got this data from a white paper from this consulting firm that specializes in education institutions. So on average, a first semester student will spend 1 hour in an advising office as opposed to 225 in a classroom, assuming, of course, that they have a full course load. So there is great potential and tells you that how faculty are central to our students developing a sense of belonging and making meaningful connections to their campuses, to their programs, to their departments, to their home departments. Another quote from Great Jobs, Great Lives, how faculty contribute to the well-being of our students. It states that if graduates had a professor who cared about them as a person, made them excited about learning, and encouraged them to pursue their dreams, their odds of being engaged at work nearly doubled, as did their odds of thriving in their well-being. But unfortunately, only 14% of graduates strongly agree that they were supported by professors who cared, made them excited about learning, and encouraged their dreams. So that further tells us that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we build an equity-minded and student-focused faculty. And finally, the Academy also is in a dire need of diversifying to create a sense of belonging and inclusiveness in our students. Because students report that it's important for them to see themselves reflected in the faculty and curriculum to which they are exposed to create a sense of belonging and inclusiveness. So with all this in mind, our conversation today will focus on two main themes. These are the two programs our college has developed in partnership with college faculty and our administration. One, to ensure that we hire equity-minded faculty who are deeply invested in student success. And the second program then works with those new faculty members to make sure they are provided with the absolute best mentoring and feedback and support and guidance that they need. The learning outcomes after this presentation is over, we hope that you will leave here with some strategies for recruiting a diverse faculty. You will also get hands-on action by practicing to create parts of an inclusive hiring rubric. And you will also be able to identify what a diverse group of first-year STEM faculty need to thrive. You should be able to explain why creating a safe and supportive mentoring space is critical for the success of individual faculty members and hence their students. And finally, we hope that you'll be able to outline key ways their college administration can support inclusive hiring and retention practices. So with that, I'm going to hand over this next piece to my colleague, Margie Merryfield, to talk about equitable faculty hiring practices. Margie, you're on.
Thanks, Dee. And I'm going to start out by talking about the Faculty Equity Advocates Program, which is the program that Dee and I are currently affiliated with. This actually got in the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics. We actually started a little earlier before the university did. We started in the fall of 2019 with an equity advisor, and I served in that role. And I was focused on tenure track search processes and improving those processes. In the spring of 2020, then the university launched a program where they invested some resources and recruited faculty equity advocates from all of our colleges, and the two largest colleges at the time had 2 equity advocates. And I'll talk a little bit about more in a minute about what all of those folks are doing. But CNSM, we're very happy since last fall has actually had 2 equity advocates working, even though we're not one of the largest colleges. But the overall goal of our program is to recruit, retain, advance, and support the success of a more diverse faculty. We move to the next one?
Yes.
Oh, we did. I'm sorry. The FEAs then, as a group, we meet periodically and work with each other and with academic affairs to learn from each other, because we bring a wealth of different kinds of expertise to the table, to share resources, and also to provide leadership to campus administrators and to deans, and feedback to campus leadership on policy. We've had a lot of conversations about retention, tenure, promotion policies, about possible changes to campus hiring policies. We, 3 of us from 3 different colleges recently submitted and were awarded an a grant from the NSF Advanced Program to focus on faculty workloads and transparency in that area, and also inequity in that area. But in addition, the FEAs develop action plans that are specific to their colleges and their contexts. And those programs are going to be different because every college is at a slightly different place. In our college, we've chosen to focus on faculty recruitment and also programming to support equity, inclusion, and belonging. And in part, we made that choice because we already had in place a mentoring program, which you're going to hear about in a little bit. So some of the activities that we have been engaged in, there has been a focus on training for search committee members and chairs. And that has included workshops on writing effective position descriptions, on recruiting and advertising plans, on developing rubrics associated with screening and selection. And also the most recent addition to this portfolio was a session on how to read and get information from candidates' equity and diversity statements. We also pay attention to search data and support the dean in monitoring the progress of searches. But probably the most important thing is that we're embedded in the search committees. So all of our tenure track searches have an embedded equity advocate who is working with the committee in every step of the process. So here are our search process steps. And I actually decided that I was going to call it a committed committee as a starting point. It's, although we a lot of times think of the search committee as kind of, entirely within the hands, entirely out of our control, influence can potentially be brought to bear in working with chairs on thinking about who would be effective on a search committee. And I think the equity advocates can have an influence on the mindset of the members of the committee. Developing a position description that is broad, it's welcoming, it shows our commitments is incredibly important, because that is how we're going to attract the attention of candidates who might be from minoritized backgrounds and recognize that this is an institution where they can thrive, but also for candidates in general who share our commitment to the success of all of our students. Robust recruiting, the old-fashioned way of recruiting, we call it post and pray, where you put the ad up and hope someone reads it. We emphasize really having everyone use all of their available contacts, screening rubrics, which I'm going to come back to reduce implicit bias in the process, and also explicit bias, frankly. Interview processes that leave candidates thinking that they might actually have a successful career with us, and then decision-making processes that ensure that whoever is recommended is a candidate that will reflect the university's commitments. So I'm going to focus today on the screening rubric. And before I do that, I'm going to put another question to you and ask you what comes to mind, and just drop it in the chat, or we can allow a couple people to speak. what might be the characteristics of a good faculty member in any field? Any thoughts? Andrea says generous. Kelly says empathetic, trust builder, supportive. Enthusiastic, committed, open, and welcoming. I can tell that I am preaching very much to the choir here today. One of the things that I sometimes hear is, well, the best candidate is going to be the best researcher. And those are actually some of the things, but many of the qualities that I see here are absolutely the sorts of things that at the end of the day, if we're looking for a faculty member who will be student-centered, are really characteristic. So if we can move. So screening rubrics, probably many of you have used rubrics somewhere along the line, either in grading or in other contexts. The typical retention, tenure, promotion document is essentially a rubric that lists what the characteristics are necessary for retention, tenure, and promotion. But for these screening rubrics, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the position description and take the criteria that are listed, because we're only going to evaluate candidates on what we asked for, not on some mysterious hidden criteria. We're going to create a scoring system for each of those criteria. We're going to define what each point on the scoring scale means for each criterion. We're going to decide what's important. So we're going to assign weights that reflect our values and priorities. And then the committee develops this, signs off on it so that it reflects their values, and then commits to using the rubric to independently score the applications. And from that, the candidates that rise to the top will form a starting point for identifying the candidates who might be invited for interviews. Some of the reasons that screening rubrics are useful: first of all, it allows us to develop a consensus on qualifications in advance. So there was a study done, and I believe the candidates in this case were candidates for chief of police, and the participants in the study were given 2 resumes, and one resume represented someone who was definitely a street smart cop, and the other represented someone who was very well educated or book smart. And the candidates and the participants in the study were asked who they liked better for this chief of police position. And when the street smart cop was named Michael and the book smart cop was named Michelle, they picked the street smart cop. But when the resume of the book smart cop was named Michael and the street smart cop was named Michelle, they picked the book smart cop. But when the participants were asked in advance to sit down and discuss what was important and come to a consensus as to whether being book smart or street smart was more important, then the gender differences disappeared. So consensus on qualifications can eliminate bias in some really important ways. It can force you out of using your gut impression to just decide that you're going to pick the person that you like the best at first reading, who may very well be someone who's a lot like you. And many studies have shown that when we rely on first impressions and heuristics, then we start relying on stereotypes, and then implicit bias creeps in. And then finally, our idea is that more work in advance can pay off in stronger consensus and better outcomes down the road. So here is an example of an actual rubric that came from one of our committees and was written by our own committees. And they were using a 5-point scale. And the criterion that was being turned into a rubric was experience or demonstrated potential for integrating undergraduate and graduate students in research projects. Well, in our college, this is a big deal. Pretty much most of the departments actually place a high value in the retention and tenure process on involving, engaging students in research. So this was a high value to the committee. And so after deliberation, the committee decided that a 5 would involve strong record of mentoring student research projects with tangible research projects, as well as a clear plan on how students would be involved in the future. A 3 would be limited experience supervising student research projects, but with a plan that would allow for that. And then a 1 level would be someone who expressed a desire to supervise student research, but they didn't really have any plan for it or provide any details or evidence that they had any experience with that. And then, the 4 and the 2 are kind of in between there. So you can see the idea where 5 represents an unusually strong candidate in an area, a 4 represents a strong candidate, a 3 represents a candidate who has done some things, but maybe has a ways to go, and then weaker candidates down the road. So now what we're going to do is give you a chance to try and come up with something on your own. And this is a criterion that appears in all of our position descriptions. The criterion is demonstrated commitment to working successfully with a diverse student population, which of course is what we have at Cal State Long Beach and at most Cal States. So the idea was we were going to do small groups. Now we have 10 people here and 5 of them are presenters and a couple of them are technical folks. So that's kind of sounds like one group of the people who are not the presenters perhaps, and Dee and I will maybe look in. I don't know what the best way to do this is when we have this smaller group, but
we can work on it together.
Yeah, but that means that we're gonna shut up. But the idea will be, Dee will put up, there's a PowerPoint. Actually, is there a way for them to type into the PowerPoint?
Yes, I will share the link. It's on OneDrive and everybody can go there and start working on it.
But before you actually start writing, the idea would be to take a minute or two to discuss the sorts of evidence you might find in a candidate's file that would provide evidence of demonstrated commitment to working successfully with a diverse population. And then, in the interest of time, we're going to suggest that you try to come up with how you would define a 3, which is the middling score, and how you would define a 5. And Larissa, yeah, I think we can talk as a large group. But Dee is going to share, if you click on your link, if you click on the link, the members who are here can actually type in the PowerPoint, am I right?
They should be able to. So can somebody try and let me know if you can access and write?
Yes, I can get in and write.
Okay. So should we share the PowerPoint slide, or let's just wait and people work on it offline?
Let's share. I think we've got a great group where we can really kind of work together because, we don't have to do that. Can we put it up on the screen and we can.
Yeah, and then people can type on their own computers potentially as well, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to share the live screen, but then people, if you can access it on your own computer.
Do that. And since it's a small group, let's do a quick round of introductions again. I know you guys wrote in the chat, but just so we also know. So we already know Christina and Larissa, they were our producers. You've met us, the 5 presenters. So Khalifa, could you please just quickly introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Khalifa Madden, the Communications Manager at Ed Insights. We facilitate the Student Success Network, which is producing the conference today.
Nice to meet you. Jasmine?
Hi, I'm Jasmine Nguyen, also with Ed Insights. I'm a research associate with the center.
Okay, welcome. And Lisa? Lisa, you there? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She unmuted for a second. All right, in the meantime, I'm gonna share my PowerPoint. Okay. So we'll just be group 1. I will
Yeah.
work on the first slide.
Mhm.
Okay, shall we first discuss where would they see this kind of evidence and
What might pop up?
okay, we're starting to see some action.
Yay. And feel free to unmute yourself and speak. Because if you were in a breakout room, a true breakout room, you would be doing that. So definitely allowable.
Whoa. Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm from Chico. Zoom keeps dropping me because I live in the country and I have a satellite internet connection and it's not letting me type on the PowerPoint either. Sorry.
Well, yeah, why don't you, well, if you have some thoughts, I can try and type.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not sure if I have some thoughts, but maybe more people will join in. And maybe it's more helpful if other people just unmute and talk as well.
I think so, yeah.
We have been, we have a hiring freeze. I don't know if everybody else does as well. But it seems like lately the bar has been higher and higher when we've been looking at new faculty. And so my guess is for a score of a 5 in my department, people would propose some sort of, I don't know, being like maybe even a published paper that has some evidence of maybe scholarship of teaching and learning, where they've shown some engagement with a diverse population or something like that. And that's a pretty high bar, especially if you're looking at a traditional faculty member who's coming in just with a PhD program and a research-based postdoc. But that would be a way 5 if they could show something like that.
I also think that actually experiencing, and we don't actually talk about this very often, but experiencing research as an undergrad or experiencing actually being the recipient of the value of these experiences can be seen as a strong indicator that they will engage in these practices in the future.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I think that is a good insight. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, in the California environment, we do not have affirmative action in the state for hiring. We are not allowed to apply racial or gender preferences in any context. But in evaluating a criterion like this, someone who can speak to their own lived experience as motivation, as a source of knowledge, as a source of how they're going to proceed, that can be extremely powerful. And I like whoever is typed moderate, more than foundational understanding of issues experienced by historically marginalized students. I you know, as a middling kind of thing, because you know, the candidates who would fail at this criterion probably, you know, they're not going to display much understanding at all, but to get a middle of the road score, you need to actually demonstrate that there is some understanding.
There was someone else trying to say something.
Oh, yeah, it was me. For some reason, yeah, my browser is kind of freezing up on me, so I wasn't really able to add. I mean, the only thing I added was before it froze was a recognition, at least of the presence of diverse populations and needs and assets. I think for I was going to also say out loud something similar to at least showing understanding of issues. I know that sometimes we'll get candidates that are coming from PWIs, right, or places where, you know, they don't have the diversity that's at least reflected in our institution, or, you know, it, like I said, is a PWI. So I would like to see, and this, it can, I don't kind of range from a 3 to a 5 here, depending on how well they do it, you know, is more kind of creative recognitions of diversity, right? And thinking about how, you know, showing some understanding of how power operates in people's lives, and using some of the language of structural oppression and inequality, systemic oppression and inequality. As for a 5, I think I'd be looking for advocacy and pedagogical changes that have been made to support students of different backgrounds and even life experiences. So I do a lot of work with student parents, and that's a group that is not often considered part of the array of diverse students. But I think, you know, also what would qualify as a 5 is somebody who recognized intersectionality and how that operates, and what it looks like in students' lives, to show a little bit more sophisticated understanding of how oppression operates.
I
I think an important aspect here is that it will vary a little bit by field also, that I would anticipate that somebody in psychology getting a 5 would have to show more than somebody in chemistry.
Yeah, and also going back to the earlier point that Lisa brought up, you know, for just a PhD and doing a traditional research postdoc for 2 years or so, maybe they haven't had many opportunities to demonstrate, but they can write about it in many different ways. And when we look at the rubric, another important point to keep in mind is commensurate with experience. So we do ask and urge the committees to keep that in their minds when they are evaluating the statements and files.
This might sound controversial, but I think going hand in hand with what was just said about having basically evidence of generational impacts and oppression, that coming with the understanding that helping a student self-actualize from an unprivileged background comes with a large emotional component. And that emotional component is very important, and that often the academic work or scholarly work is not as difficult as the emotional work that it takes to transition into cultures, to understand new norms, to learn to advocate for oneself. So all of those things have a large emotional component, and it needs to be something that is respected. So I would say, and this might be controversial, that somebody who openly acknowledges that as an obstacle is somebody who should score a 5, because they already have an advanced understanding of the complications of doing this work.
Can I add on something to that real quickly?
Please do.
I think I might maybe rank it a little bit lower. And I think what would put them in that category of 5 is if they actively sought education to address those gaps, which, you know, those opportunities are available in all disciplines. And, you know, this is something I'm learning about a lot more. I do have the advantage of coming from women's gender and sexuality studies and ethnic studies. So this is just, you know, it is inherent to everything that we do. And we often provide that training. But, you know, I do know that there are opportunities that exist for folks in STEM to get more of that education. And then we have like NCBI and, you know, opportunities like that. So I really appreciate, I think that the recognition, right? There are gaps in my knowledge. There are things that are outside of my view because of, you know, the ways in which my identity allows me to filter the world. But, you know, these are the ways in which I have actively sought to learn more or to grow or to understand others.
So many very well said comments. I'm going to kind of try to wrap this piece of the segment up because we have a lot to still talk about. And just to say that one of the things that, so I have probably read 1,000 of these equity and diversity statements written by candidates over the past few years, because we've had some rather large searches with large candidate pools. And while, yes, our candidates coming from, say, science education or math education have often had formal coursework that gives them maybe a more nuanced view of some of these issues, I was pleasantly surprised last year reading statements from candidates where they had within their own fields, hard science, classical fields, recognized the need to learn, to engage in dialogue, to grapple with these very difficult questions. But now I'm thinking, Dee, perhaps we can go back to the main slides, because I don't want to short too much time for, I know we got a slightly late start. So we'll move on to the next one, because I think we've talked about all of this. And we've talked a little bit about the kinds of evidence that you spotted, and you've all got to see what the definitions might look like. There is no right or wrong answer to this. I think it is important to have some differentiation. But what I want to conclude with is just a few little tips for how to apply your rubric once you've developed it. The first one is to allow plenty of time. This is not easy stuff. It takes a while to develop the rubric, and then it takes a long time to score with a rubric until you get the hang of it. Having each committee member scoring separately and independently is also very important, because it's way too easy to get involved in groupthink if you're not taking that step. It's important for committee chairs to make sure that everybody has done their homework prior to there being a committee discussion. When people come unprepared, then they fall back on heuristics, they fall back on stereotypes and first impressions. You should always allow for the fact that your rubric is not going to account for all possible candidate strengths or ways of meeting a criterion. We're just not that good. We're not going to figure it all out in advance. And so a lot of our rubrics have things built in to allow for that person who really brought something unusual and special in a particular area to get credit for it, even if it didn't tick the boxes that were anticipated. The scores don't have to rule, the raw scores do not have to rule, but it is important in discussing who's going to advance to make sure that they're advancing based on the criteria that you've decided on in advance for the position. And then the last piece of advice, and this is actually in some of the materials that Kurt's developed as well, is designating a member of the committee who is going to be vigilant for bias and equity issues. And in our committees, I mean, I'm going to do that, but I'm not the designated person. A voting member of the committee needs to be doing this. And the reason for it being a designated member of the committee is to take off any onus for calling out your colleagues, for pointing out, well, maybe there was some bias that was in there. Just a really simple example. We were discussing on one of the searches I was on a candidate's interview, and one person on the committee said, and this is in a very male-dominated field, well, I didn't like the way that she said we all the time in talking about her research, because it made me question whether she had done the research herself and how much of it was her work. And before I could say anything, another male member of the committee said, well, actually, there's a lot of data that suggests that women are far more likely to say we than men, and we shouldn't hold this against the candidate. So when the rank and file members of the committee develop a mindset that says it's okay to be vigilant, then we start to really make progress. But I believe now I get to turn the pulpit over to Andrea Balbas, and I'm really excited because Andrea was hired after screening by the very first such rubric that I was ever involved in developing. And I was so excited when her application started rising to the top.
Thank you, Margie. So I'm very excited to be here as the data point. I will start off by saying that I am very much a non-traditional student. I did not have any college degree until I was 39 years old. I'm Mexican American. I'm a first generation earner of a degree. And I began my job search really with this in mind. And I was concerned that potentially I might not find a fit, right? I didn't know if the work that I wanted to do, I was going to find a fit for. And so I use myself and my experience as a case study. And I use myself as a case study to help as many students as I can. And by helping them, I mean, I want to help them self-actualize. And so I know that there's a lot of work that we have been doing, and we've been talking about our commitment to equity and enhancing student success. But in some disciplines, so I'm in the field of geology, which has not yet reached parity and still has a problem of open and implicit sexism. So in that vein, we see a lot of expressions of support of equity and student success, but not necessarily as much practice or policy that is directed towards equity and student success. So when I started my interview process here, I was interviewing with 3 other institutions at that time, and none of those institutions had an equity advocate on the hiring committee. So that I definitely took note of. And I actually said something to my husband about it. I said, well, maybe these people mean business. And then also when I applied for the job, it was more of an open call. So in geology, again, a field that has not yet reached parity, they're usually very specialized. So you need to be somebody who works in volcanic rocks associated with, let's say, a subduction zone. But this call was more open, which provoked my application in that I might not have been the perfect fit for some type of niche, but I definitely could teach to the classes that they were requiring. So both of these things opened up my advancement. And as the hiring process began to unfold more and more, I noticed more that my goals seemed more in sync with the goals of the college and the university. And as a matter of fact, as we grew through the process and as I came closer to getting my offer and then ultimately getting my offer, I did not continue my interviewing with the other 3 universities. So I stopped my interview process and then communicated to them that I had found an offer that I was taking without even going to meet some of these places. I had just been already offered to be flown out and go meet them. So in that way, that they were expressing their intent and their motivation by action. And that made the world of difference for me, because we can talk and talk and talk, but especially in the world of geology, that talk hasn't evolved into necessarily a changed dynamic. And so this was very, very important to me and allowed to, for me to select this institution and this college and this department.
Right. Thank you, Andrea. That was beautiful. And with this, I'm gonna ask our dean, Dean Bennett. So, you know, we're coming a full circle. You saw the faculty equity advocate piece, and then the very first hire we made using the rubrics and having the FEA on the search committee, you heard from Andrea. And now Dean Bennett will share some of his tips, because you know, we couldn't have done any of this if we didn't have his support or the dean's office's support. So Dean Bennett, please.
Thanks, Dee. I really appreciate. And forgive me if my voice goes out midway through. I'm battling I hope cold, not COVID at this point, from home. So, but if I take a drink, that's what's going on. So a lot of this is tips for administrators, chairs, deans, people who want to get this sort of thing going. What at least I did to have it help. And, you know, and one of the most important things is that hiring inclusively takes intentionality and mindful leadership. You can't just say it's important for us to hire inclusively. You really have to put your money where your mouth is, or what I like to say usually is that one of the most important things that a dean can do to show that something is important is either put money behind it or give time. And I try to do both. So I noted in the chat that there was a comment about equal opportunity advocates, or whatever was the word for it, was by volunteer, but our equity advocates do get release time to be equity advocates. And that was one of the very initial intents, was that this takes time, this takes energy, and we want it done. And I want to show this is important to me, so that everybody knows that if they're not thinking about how to be inclusive in their hiring, that will show up in my thinking about the department. Tied into that, I meet with every search committee for an hour before they get started, and I run through two of the handouts that you've got, the front and back page, because that's showing my commitment to this again, you know. But it really is important that faculty equity advocate work is compensated. This is real work, and if we don't compensate it, we're really not giving it what it deserves. Another important aspect for me is that I review files both prior to interviews, prior to campus invites. I have sent files back that typically the committees need to give me an explanation why every candidate is a semifinalist. And I have on multiple occasions sent those back to the committees and said, rewrite. Occasionally I'll add somebody or subtract somebody if the equity advocate makes that recommendation. But in truth, what I really want to see is that these files are looking like the sort of faculty we want to hire, and that the committee is paying attention to equity. And perhaps the most interesting case was when I got a bunch of files and I noted that there was a differentiation between how the research was written about for the women and the men. And it was a department that had not hired a woman faculty member in about 11 years. And when I looked, there was a lot said about the women on DEI issues and very little said about research. And the opposite was true of the men. I called the committee in, and one of the committee members, and I believe them, by the way, said, that was my fault. I couldn't find anything else to say about the men, because the ones who were committed to equity and diversity were primarily the women candidates. They had strong men researchers. But what was more informative to me was that, in fact, I could read the files and I can bean count, And I could see that the women were publishing in the same journals with the same number of publications as the men. And so I just sent it back and I said, you've got to write about this equitably, not equally. Having the same length of description is not the same as giving the same intention of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then they came back, and that search actually eventually hired 2 women. So it was particularly important. Sometimes you'll need to require that there's an additional candidate brought to campus to augment their selection. And as just a quick reminder, the CSU-wide Chancellor's Doctoral Incentive Program will reimburse campus expenses if they're bringing CDIP fellows in. So let's go to the next slide. So the other thing is to remember that you've got to be an advocate, an ally, and a leader, and that faculty responses to changing hiring practice may vary, right? Your mileage may vary, and that's part of why it's important to be thoughtful with the chairs about who would make a good committee. What's the best chance that you can to make things come up where people do understand this is important? It's really important that you've got leadership and direction for the practices, because often people are very much in favor of the concept of equitable hiring, but they still live in a false academia is a meritocracy perspective of the world. And so they don't see how past hiring practices aren't always getting the best candidate, because they've defined best by the previous understanding, by a 1950s, really British and German understanding of the university. And then finally, and this is the third handout, it's useful to understand the spectrum of faculty responses. It's, this was adapted from a growth chart for equity and diversity, and it was made an inclusive hiring growth chart. And it's a very interesting way to think about, any number of times, these are some of the responses I hear from faculty. And it's useful to look at some of those and say, what would my response be to a faculty member who says, well, I wouldn't have been hired by doing this. So I think at that, it's my turn to turn it over to back to Dee, right?
Yes. Thank you, Kurt, for sharing these golden nuggets with our audience. So next we move on to our second program. So this concludes the FEA portion, the hiring piece. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Kelly Young, and she will talk about the program she's been spearheading, faculty mentoring and retention for our college. Kelly, please.
Perfect, thank you. And thank you all for hanging in there for the second and shorter part of the seminar. So we're going to switch gears, like Dee said, to talk really about more how we can be more inclusive in our support of new faculty members once they've started at a CSU. So you've done the work, you've hired a faculty that is more reflective of our students, that serve as advocates for student success for all of our students, but now it's time to support, right? How do we support our new faculty when they first get here? And I think one thing I'd like to start with is that we all know, we know what new faculty need. If you stop and you think about it, oh, what would be nice? This would be something that would support new faculty. So if you could just throw in the chat one thing, a phrase, a word, something that a new faculty member needs to feel supported, to feel like this is an inclusive environment. So if you want to throw anything in the chat there, that would be great. Because I think the thing is that we know an invitation to lunch, yes, that's important. Having that thoughtful mentorship and connecting the faculty, yes, the networking and recognizing their whole selves. Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. This is exactly what we need to do. And I think the point is here, we know things that are supportive. We know what we should do and what faculty need. And when we think about this, though, we think, okay, well, yeah, that's what new faculty need, and they're getting that support from, somewhere. I'm sure it's happening, right? I'm sure they're getting support. And the truth is that maybe they're getting that support they need. They might be connecting with the right colleagues. They might have a wonderful department chair who's doing this, but they might not, right? And I think it's really important to not count on luck, right? That they luck out. That's not a good way of supporting our faculty members. So instead, being very intentional about this and being very deliberate. And that's what we've done at Cal State Long Beach. We have our College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics has developed this strategic approach to faculty mentoring that really complements what we already have. Because yes, there are some onboarding procedures, there are campus-wide events and programming for our new faculty. So it's not a competition, it really complements what's already there. Again, this comes down to support, and you'll hear briefly from our dean at the end too, but I think that this is critical that he appointed a college faculty member, and again for this year it's me, to serve as the director of faculty retention and work with faculty during their first 3 years or more, you know, as they work through their reappointment period, as they work through their tenure period. Now, because, and there we go, we've got the information there that it's not, because we're doing this within the campus, it's discipline adjacent. And I think this is important to be either discipline specific or discipline adjacent, because sometimes that campus-wide messaging, it doesn't necessarily hit all of the points, particularly when we're talking about things that are those tenurable activities, the research, the scholarly and creative activities. Having somebody who's discipline specific or discipline adjacent can be so useful in terms of understanding how to get those programs started. How do you get your research started? What are some pitfalls that may happen? What is some advice? And this is a critical piece to provide that goes, again, it's not in competition with, but it's adding to and echoing what we see coming from the campus. Also, providing this faculty insider support and advice is a critical thing to reveal that hidden curriculum. And I know that's a term that's used for students, but I absolutely think that this is true for faculty as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about those hidden rules of academia. And I think there's often hidden pathways that unless we are mindful and reveal them, they may not be apparent to everyone. All right, so your college-specific mentoring program can echo this guidance. So if you have this, I think it's important, it can echo this guidance that's coming across the university, from those other channels. I think of it too as translating this information. It's important to know, like, what should you pay attention to? We're getting so many emails all the time. What is critical? What can you say no to? What should you absolutely say yes to? Another role of this college mentor is to form connections. And Larissa, I think you said that is something that was important that we needed to have for new faculty. Forming connections, not just between groups of junior faculty who are going through similar experiences, but also to listen to what each individual needs. What are their interests? Both like was mentioned, holistically, themselves as a person, but then also professionally. How can you connect them to the broader university network? Now, I think some people would say here, well, yeah, but they'd get there anyway, right? Well, and yes, they likely would. You would make those connections. But if those connections can be made a little bit earlier in their careers, and these faculty members are going to have a broader group of allies, a broader group of collaborators, a broader group of friends, then it's going to feel like much more of a supportive environment, especially if this is a mindful and if these connections are made very intentionally. Being an advocate for them as they move through these early years, I think, is really key. We've talked about a lot how isolating it can feel to be reviewed. Even though everybody's going through the same process, you feel alone sometimes when you're sharing yourself in this file that's being reviewed, and it can feel very much like an isolating process. And again, just because we're all going through it doesn't mean, or that we all went through it, doesn't mean that this is the best way to support faculty. Oh, I made it through, well, not when we're looking at things through an equity lens. We need to rethink this process. So along with that, and the last thing on this slide is really to approach this position, not as somebody sort of top down, like these are the rules, this is what you must do, but really you're there to working very mindfully to mitigate that power differential, like to make sure that you're building that trust, that you're building rapport, and so faculty members know that your support is genuine, right? You're not doing this just to say like, okay, you've got to check these boxes, but you really, that they should feel like your support is a genuine support. Okay, so why does this matter? And this is because retention is absolutely an issue, especially when we're talking about individuals from groups who've been historically marginalized, historically oppressed. I think this is something that we definitely need to be mindful of. Yes, academia has a lot of perks. I mean, this is my dream job. I feel incredibly lucky to get paid to be able to provide these incredible learning experiences for students. They can be transformative, and what a privilege, to be a part of that process. Plus, we get to study what we love, and I think this is amazing. So there's a draw there. However, I think it's important to recognize that the work that we are expected to do as faculty members really has increased. And at the same time, options in the private sector have increased. So faculty may opt out. There may be other ways to fulfill themselves intellectually if they don't feel supported in your college. In terms of retention, it's also really important to note that there is, again, we talked about this before, that hidden burden, that hidden tax. And to me, it's like, it's only hidden if you're not part of it. When you're part of it, it is a definite burden, right? Of the additional mentoring, the additional service. And we see this again, hitting women and hitting faculty from groups that have been historically oppressed and discriminated against. And this burden of making sure to show up, to be that advocate, to do that extra service because you care, can lead not only to burnout, but also you're spending a lot of time on those non-tenurable activities, right? That other people may not have to engage in. And this can be a problem. And sometimes leaving academia is then it happens because you just haven't had enough time for your scholarship. Stress can also be placed on faculty members when family expectations and cultural norms don't mesh exactly with that traditional white culture norm of, essentially work above all else, work above family, work above physical or mental health. I think when academia is expecting so many hours a week from you, but your family is also expecting and engage in healthy interaction, this can put a lot of stress on any faculty member. I believe in the first gen can happen anywhere. So we talk about this all the time with new faculty members who are hitting, they're coming to academia, and really this is a new transition. So not knowing optimal ways to navigate the system is a thing. Yes, it's a very different thing, but it still can happen at the faculty level. And finally, I think this is tied in so much with that idea of those rules of academia, these rules that aren't written down. They're expressed by some, but not all colleagues. They're interpreted differently. And I think it's important to note that sometimes these rules can go against values, can go against issues of privacy, issues, expectations of the job. These are all conversations that I've had with new faculty members over the last few years. And this can really help or can contribute to pushing faculty out before tenure. So again, I know this group knows all of this, but I think I just wanted to center us like, this is an issue. Retention is an issue, and there's lots of reasons why. But having a college mentoring plan in place can help, especially if you have this multi-pronged approach. And I think it should start before the faculty member even starts. I think that it is up to us as faculty members to start providing a counter narrative to that more official tone of onboarding, paperwork. It's time for your background check, all this stuff coming at them from the university. What if they were having this welcoming tone coming from their college? This personal, hey, we're so glad you're here. It doesn't have to be elaborate, and technically, because they're not getting paid, you can't make anything like official task, but it can be something that you can do to make them feel welcome. And one thing that I've done and gotten a lot of positive feedback on is just simply sharing a list of recommendations with the new faculty members, again, like maybe in June before they move. And we've gathered recommendations from the college faculty and staff, recommendations for dentists, preschools, daycare, physicians, coffee shops. We talk about mechanics, dog sitters, like where to go on the weekend. Hey, wait, we do things on the weekend. People share all of those things. And this may seem pretty trivial, But to give you a taste of it, and I'd love, even if the producers could contribute to this, because I want to see your tips, if you could type in the chat anything. Do you have something around? So put in your CSU so we know what area we're talking about again. And then is there a favorite local hidden gem? Like, is there a farmer's market? Is there a takeout restaurant you love? Is there a viewpoint that's really cool to go to, or an annual festival? So anything, if you want to share with us, tell us your CSU, and then tell us something cool that you like about your area. And then go ahead and throw it in the chat. Whenever you're ready. We were going to wait, but I think we'll just do it as it comes in. Ooh, farmers market's nice. I do love the beach path in Long Beach. Andrea, I have not been there. I need to get that ice cream. This is really important. Ooh, oh yeah, that's right. You guys are close to Yosemite. This is cool. Awesome. These things, these tiny personal things matter. In fact, we have some responses on the slide from faculty members who've said that they really matter. And these are from brand new faculty members, before they even, have gotten here. In addition to, I have one in there from somebody who's been here for a long time who wrote me and said, wow, I didn't even know that my colleagues cared about this or like the same things I did. So it builds community across the college. How simple is that? You just send out a Qualtrics survey, you put it on an Excel, and then you send it to your new faculty members. Suddenly, they're not thinking about like, oh my gosh, I need to think about daycare, or I need to think about, I have to find a really great obstetrician or whatever, obstetrician. That's very specific. Sorry, I'm a reproductive biologist. These things just come out sometimes. So if they need to find something really specific, suddenly it's there and they can feel welcomed. So thanks for doing that activity with me. And maybe you can implement it at your own campus. Okay, I have a last few things to cover. What else do we do? Well, we do lots of things. So weekly posts to the new faculty member every single week, plus a little before and after. It's about 45 different posts on topics that are timely. So they just get a little personal, hey, it's mid-semester time, or it's a week before, you may want to consider creating a mid-semester evaluation. Here's a little, sample, here's something you can follow. Here's the research on why. Here's how you post grades. Hey, what is a withdrawal? Or tips about getting your retention or reappointment, tenure, and promotion files started. Things like that, just weekly tips. So you're always constantly there with little bits of advice. And for CNSM, I found just posting it, sending it via email is a great way to interact with faculty members. When they're ready, they email back, and some weeks they just tell me they save it for future reference. So doing those posts is important. I also created workshops for how to craft your file. I know that the university has workshops, but we can talk really specifically. Again, discipline adjacent. It's an important thing. I also created a workbook that they can go through step by step. And I translated all of the official language into plain language and help them through we have to use Interfolio. I don't know what everybody else uses, but guide them through this process in a way that feels personal. And also this shares like, okay, this is kind of silly, but this is what happens. And here's how you navigate it. And it makes a connection, right? And it helps them, again, see those hidden things of how to advance as you're advancing in your career. We've arranged lunches and events to form a community. This is particularly important now. We have our second year faculty. They're engaged in a faculty learning community. And then our third year faculty ideally take part, or if not earlier, in our advancing inclusive mentoring. And finally, I just have an open door policy for providing that networking, problem solving guidance. And honestly, it's a lot of listening for faculty. And yes, it means a lot of work outside of regular hours, but it also means faculty can feel supported. Feels like they don't just have, somebody who can answer questions, but truly an advocate. somebody who actually cares about them and will support them and can help them see that there's lots of people on campus. There's other like-minded people. There's people who will be their allies, who will be supportive of them as well. And I think if you don't have this at your CSU, I think if you're interested in starting this, one of the things that I started or to start this was asking tenured faculty what would have helped. And that's a great way of starting. Just what would you have needed? And really listen. So finally, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Balbas again, our data point. You are more than a data point. Our fabulous and incredible colleague who is a fantastic mentor, researcher, teacher. I'd love to hear your perspective on the mentoring through the college as well. So thanks.
Well, thank you so much. So I'll just, I'm very appreciative of my mentor, Kelly. I describe her as a warrior manning the front lines. And when I have sweat in my eyes, I think I'm going to give up and my sword is too heavy. I look up and there she is manning the front lines with fierceness, and I get back up. And so one of the things about this is building that relationship. I know very well what Dr. Young, Kelly Young's intentions are. I know that she's good-hearted and she wants to help people. And so when I stumble or I feel overwhelmed, I think about her. And that's what I mean when I say that the retention program offers us a sense of community, and that I am bound to her, not by this job, but by another human being who has the same goals that she has, which is helping people. So one of the things that happens when we are recruited for our intellectual difference is that you get somebody who is intellectually different. And when you get intellectual difference coming into a department that may not have had that type of diversity in the past, there are going to be speed bumps. So when you recruit for diversity, you get diversity, then change to a department is difficult. And if you are the epicenter of that change, it might be a little more difficult. So the retention program is a vital part of this practice, in that you can't just throw this new person that has all these different ideas into an older group and expect them to thrive. And the goal is to get intellectual diversity that actually thrives. So for example, what I call my intensive mentoring program, I understand, I'm acutely aware that in order to have a strong mentoring relationship with my students, that nucleation site, it takes place from the first word of my mouth, out of my mouth, in my classroom. The relationships I build with students begin with the first word out of my mouth in the classroom. And so my student-centered approach to teaching may be perceived as lacking rigor or intensive learning. And so I directly refuse to perpetuate that myth that a student-centered focus is mutually exclusive of rigor. And so that may mean that I experience more speed bumps. I have friends that have been told that they pander to students because of their student-centered motivations. And so when you have a group outside of your department or outside of your colleagues that you directly interact with every day in all of your meetings that has shared goals, which is enhancing student success, this allows you to not feel isolated when you're having those difficult times. And again, we're all going to have those difficult times, but when you build a sincere community that is based on shared values, you have the opportunity to stumble and a hand to help you get back up. And so when you do the work of helping students, it is not easy work. It is complicated work. It takes a lot of emotional effort. And to have that backup is really vital. So I would say the most important part about the retention program is that your mentor shouldn't be a giant jerk. So if it's a giant jerk, that person is not going to be helpful, right? We should be a good-hearted person that intends to help students and intends to help the faculty members. So I have had huge gains from this part of the program. And I would also say that it helps us understand the expectations. So for me, when I have always been aware that I'm swimming against the tide, I like to know as soon as I hit the ground, what are the expectations? Because my intention is to exceed them. So when I hit the ground and I am looking around for the expectations, I know I have a point person that can define those for me. And so I think it's very common for people that come from underrepresented backgrounds to want to know the rule book. Give me the rules hard and fast so that I can play by the rules and navigate the system that I'm unaware of. And the recruitment and the retention program both helped me understand those rules so I could find my footing. And so I was very vital. And I would say that there is definitely a through point between me and Kelly and directly to my students. So there have been times that Dr. Young has been in my office and a student comes to meet me for a practice interview. And I say, here is your grand mentor. And they go, oh, and they're so excited. I said, this is the person I go to when I get confused and traumatized. And they love it and they laugh and they have a great time. And they're so happy to see the person that helps me. So there is definitely a through line to student success here. And it is profound.
Thank you, Andrea. Again, what a great testimony to our retention program and the director of retention in our college. And as I mentioned before, we couldn't do any of this without the support we need to. You know, we have all these great ideas, but we need the support of our dean. So Dean Bennett, you are up again. Please share some tips.
Thanks, Dee, and thanks again. And I think one of the things that is not really a tip for administrators and chairs and deans, but maybe is a take advantage when you can. As you can tell, we have some real rock stars in this college and doing this work. And I don't mean me. It's the people that you've heard from today. They are the ones that make it happen. And it's finding them and helping them do it is part of what we have to do. So again, just like in hiring, retaining hires from non-majority groups takes mindful leadership. You really have to do it with intentionality. I noticed this in particular back when I was a department chair. I did a number of program reviews. And I remember I was in one program review where I heard 6 times that they had organic mentoring. And I actually presented slightly before I finished interviewing all of the new faculty to the department. And I said, by the way, I think what your organic mentoring is doing is it's mentoring those from majority groups, not those who are underrepresented. And the last person I met with was the sole woman assistant professor. And my first question to her is, tell me about mentoring. And her immediate response was, they say it's organic. That just means they don't want to do it. And it was very evident that that was not the response I'd gotten from the male assistant professors. And that's exactly why we can't count on luck, is when we count on luck, as Kelly said, that we don't want to. The people who get the mentoring are those who already have an into the rule book anyway. And that hidden rule book that Andrea was talking about is exactly what's hidden. So this is important work. Directors of retention are critical. They must be compensated. And the next 4 comments are things that I wish I'd known 3 years ago when I asked Kelly to start doing this work, because it can grow beyond belief. So first is define the job description. Make sure you know whether it's work with the faculty through year 1, through reappointment or a retention review, through tenure. I recommend shorter, not longer, because there's always more people coming in. Think about when there should be a handoff to other mentors and how you'll get that structured. That we're fortunate that we have one department that does a good job of mentoring. We're unfortunate in that we have other departments that don't do a good job of assigning mentors. Think about what's the responsibility of the director before you get started, because again, it can grow and it can grow. Then what I would say is, I think a multidisciplinary college-wide approach is best complemented by department-specific mentors. Kelly is right. You need somebody who's field adjacent, but sometimes you really do also need somebody in the field. And the goal should be to creating mentoring webs. And it's always a mentoring web that has been shown to be the most valuable. Also, and this goes with both the equity advocates and the retention director, which is meetings. That it's not enough to just assign them the duty. It's to make sure that you can have meetings, monthly, so that you're aware of the issues from your direction. And with that, I think we're up to questions.
I'd like to ask a question if I can. First, I want to thank you all. Thank you. I want to thank you all for your presentation. So even though this is for STEM, it has very wide implications. And I can see the potential for it across my entire campus. So this year I have an appointment as it's a 3-unit course release as special assistant to the provost for faculty equity and belonging. And the work that I'm doing is very targeted right now, working with faculty parents, women of color faculty. We've had what I'm calling a retention crisis. We're hemorrhaging women of color faculty. I'm also working with associate professors. I'm providing more support and kind of demystifying that path to promotion and working with the personnel committee on clarifying some of the language around promotion. So all of this is really, really pertinent to the work that I'm doing right now. It's giving me a lot of ideas. But something that I'd like to work on with my college, and I'm leading a conversation with other department chairs. I'm a department chair as well. I will be leading a conversation around mentoring. So like I put in the chat, we have a mentoring mandate, not a mentoring program. It's in our APM that our faculty will be assigned a mentor, but there's no support for the mentors. There's no workshops. There's no resources and no accountability. And so mentees have become stranded as a result. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more about what that process looks like for recruiting mentors, and what opportunities do you have for professional development around mentorship? So how do you mentor the mentors?
And Kelly and Kurt, do you want to take this question? Kurt?
Well, I can start. I think I'm going to throw it back to the chemists in the crowd, frankly, because the answer is we don't necessarily have, this is why I was saying we have one department that's doing well at the local level. But before I became here as dean, biology had a mentoring program. And then the department chair who came in before I was here as dean came in and said, no, the department chair should mentor everybody, and dismantled their mentoring program as I understand it. And Kelly can correct me if I've gotten the details wrong on that. I probably a little more forceful about how they did this than is accurate. But I think that's actually one of my gaps right now, is getting a better mentoring in other departments. But it's also because of that forced versus chosen, right? How many, when you tell people they have to be a mentor and it's not rewarded, you run into exactly the problems that both Andrea had mentioned, and I think that was mentioned by the questioner, by Larissa, was it? And so it's hard. Now, chemistry, which is the department that both Dee and Margie are in, does assign mentors and seems to do a good job of it. So I'm going to turn it over to her unless Kelly has something to correct me on.
Kelly, do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think you can definitely speak to what's going on in chemistry. I was adding in the chat that our Advancing Inclusive Mentoring Program, I'm so glad you know people taking it at Fresno. That's fantastic. It was originally developed for faculty mentoring students, but absolutely we've had feedback that has helped with mentoring junior faculty members as well, because the whole program is created with this eye of inclusive mentoring, positive mentoring. And then Dee, you can talk about what's going on in chemistry. I can say that one thing that we haven't done but want to implement is well, two things. One, rewarding mentoring in the retention, tenure, and promotion. That has been a cause of mine. I've been working at all levels as much as I can to try to get mentoring there, that it is seen, that it is heard, that it is that this work, this hard work that directly impacts student success is a tenurable activity. And I think Margie, you nodded to that in the chat as well. And the second thing is I get we can't necessarily give everybody 3 units of release time to mentor, but we can give a coffee card. You know, we could give $25 to go, you know, go and just, and so we're just saying, look, we know this work is taking place and we want to honor that with a little something. Just, I think the recognition wherever we can get it is important, and it opens the conversation about the importance of mentorship.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit. I know we are a minute over our scheduled time, but for the program that the chemistry has, as new faculty come in, they are always assigned a mentor. And chemistry is quite, you know, the division specific. We have biochemistry, we have organic chemistry, physical chemistry. So most likely it will be, you know, I'm a biochemist. I was paired up with a biochemist. And for the first 2 years, it was actually really, really important. There are so many questions. I did not even know what a Scantron looks like. You know, what is a Scantron machine? The office staff laughed at me when I asked. So now, you know, I'm a mentor myself, paying it forward, so it helps. So, you know, you've gotten all that help on your RTP files, the questions you may have. And I, you know, do the same for my mentee. So the first thing I show them is, let me take you to the office and show you that we have a Scantron machine. This is what it looks like, and this is how it works, even if they know exactly what it is. But, you know, it's been working well. I think just getting that support from your mentor, and you feel like you have to, you know, and you're ready for your mentee. So discipline specific and discipline adjacent, I think that's the pairing we are aiming to go for. So Kelly does what she does fantastically well, but there's only one Kelly. So, you know, we need to find more support within the departments too.
Yeah, it sounds like this work needs to be institutionalized within the university and across the university. I really like this idea of being mentee ready, or I always talk about being student ready, but being mentee ready, right? I was even thinking, I think some professors might want to know where the lactation rooms are, right? Or where the gender inclusive restrooms are. So I really appreciate all, I mean, I could talk about this all day. I have like so many more questions, but I really appreciate it. And I've learned a lot from San Diego State, from their resources that they have for mentors and mentees. And, you know, something I tell folks is that, you know, we need to prepare both the mentors to mentor and the mentees to be mentee, because I didn't even know how to be a mentee. I didn't know the questions to ask. So having San Diego State has some great roadmaps and checklists for mentoring. So the more that we can kind of provide resources to structure the process, I think the more productive and efficient we can be in our mentoring. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And feel free to contact any one of us, Larissa, if you have any questions that we couldn't answer today. Shoot us an email and we'll be very happy to. All right, so, yep, yay. All right, so shall we just stop the meeting? I think Christina.
If you are planning on attending the last session, go to the hub to find that. And I am going to go ahead and stop the recording with a thanks to everyone and for all of those additional resources that are present and available. Those were amazing. Sorry, as a spectator, but it is still like amazing and something I'm still going to be looking for. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Can I ask you a question really quickly? We like to highlight sessions in our blogs or through interviews. Would you all be willing to do an interview or write a blog for us? And we have a whole process